So today we're in Dublin and we've got David, who's the head of SEO from Groupon. So David, take us through a quick summary of how you got started in SEO and how it brought you to Groupon.
So yeah, it's a bit of a long journey. I did loads of different jobs, right? I jumped around from one thing to another for a long time. After college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I started to work for a couple of people and do a few things on a couple of websites, but to be honest, I didn't really know what I was doing.
Okay.
But it got me intrigued and it got me interested, and I wanted to learn more about, how do you develop a website, how do you get visibility, and I didn't know where to start. Mm-hmm. So I said, right, I'm going to go and do a digital marketing course. Did a pretty basic digital marketing course, learned a bit from it, but, it got me more interested. And again, that willingness and that want to learn, I just kind of decided, okay, I want to take this further. So how do I go about doing that? So I did like an entry level role in a small agency in Dublin. Okay. They were called Red Engine, and so I worked there for a while. I was really lucky there because I got to work with loads of great people and people who at that stage had already been in digital marketing and SEO for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, which at that stage wasn't very common because that's going back 10 or 12 years already. So, these people had been doing SEO since 2000 or even before that. So it was really good getting to work with those types of people. And then in that role, because it was a small agency, and you guys will know when you're in a small agency, you get immersed in every part of it. So it's not just SEO.
You wear many hats.
Yeah, and you have to do everything. So you're involved in PPC, you're involved in email marketing, you're writing content, you're getting backlinks, you're doing all that sort of stuff. So it was kind of more broad digital marketing that I was doing originally. And there was a guy who used to come in and he was a consultant and he used to work in the agency just a couple of days a week. And I used to just hammer him with questions, ask him questions about SEO all the time. And for me, that was like a really good learning at the start of my career because I just asked question over question. And then the more I talked to him, the more interested I got in just SEO, even though I was doing other elements as well. So, from there, I ended up, things didn't end well with that agency. It was a small agency. Right. Timing was probably not great. I suppose online marketing was not that it was only starting, but it wasn't very accessible for a lot of people and a lot of companies. So then myself and a couple of guys from that agency set up our own thing, which was Brave Media. Mm-hmm. And I was doing that for about 2 years. And again, there was different circumstances of the people who were involved in that business for different reasons, personal reasons, professional reasons, and different things that after about 2 years, we decided to go our separate ways. And straight after that, I was thinking to myself, I want to go stay with agency because I still have a lot to learn. I want to learn more. And, at that time, I think there was like literally a handful of agencies in Dublin. So it wasn't that easy to get SEO roles in agencies in Dublin. So an opportunity came up in Ryanair and I decided to jump at it because I was like, this is going to be the best learning experience ever. Huge website, biggest airline
big brand
in Europe, second biggest airline in the world. It was in the top 10 travel websites in the world at the time. So I was like, this is an awesome opportunity. So I jumped on that. I did 2 years there and like the learning curve was steep, but it was an amazing experience. Met a lot of people, learned a lot. It was very different moving from agency to in-house. And then from there, I felt like I just needed to take the next step up in my career in terms of SEO and maybe move to a business where SEO was not a smaller brand, but a brand that needed SEO more than Ryanair did. Ryanair didn't need non-brand SEO, for example, wasn't a big deal for them, right? Because everyone knows who Ryanair are. So then, I moved to a company called Smartbox, who were a big European brand, not very well known in Ireland, but a big European brand. Their headquarters is in Dublin. And I was there for, I think, almost 5 years. And obviously I would have worked with Craig through Smartbox, and that was an amazing experience. Again, relatively small team as well, but got to get immersed in a huge website that was very big in terms of the structure, the architecture, loads of different markets across Europe. So that was super interesting. And then, as we discussed already, only 6 months ago, I took another leap, another move, because I think sometimes a change is as good as a break, right? Sometimes you need a bit of freshness, and that's nothing against any of the other companies I work for. I've learned something in all of them, but sometimes you get to a point in your career where I personally felt like in order to progress in SEO and progress my career, felt like the right time to move on, even though it was in the middle of a pandemic. But that's just the way it goes.
Fair. What was the role in Ryanair? What was your job position there?
Ryanair, I was SEO manager or head of SEO. I was the only person doing SEO in Ryanair, right?
I was going to ask, did they have a big team?
In Ryanair, no. It was it was literally me. I had onboarded a kind of performance marketing agency who had a dedicated platform specifically for airlines, right, for SEO and SEM. And I brought them in, so essentially they were like my extended team almost, and I worked with them for most of my time in Ryanair, so like they were literally at hand for everything, and that was a big project that I worked on in Ryanair. But it felt like I had a team, even though within the airline itself, they're a company that everyone knows who they are. 99% of their traffic is branded in and around, so from that perspective, they didn't really require, I suppose, a full SEO team, or they felt they didn't require it. Whether they did or not, you could argue all day, right?
Did you find the jump from the agency life to something like Ryanair, in terms of communication, be able to, because you're the only person there, so everyone was looking at you for SEO, so your superiors and stuff like that. In terms of like communication, where did that come from? Because that's one thing I've found with working people in an in-house role, they tend to be really good communicators and they can explain the journey of SEO really, really well. Did you ever feel like your depth? How did you work in the communication side of things? And would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, 100%. Firstly, did I ever feel out of my depth? 100%. When I went into that job, I felt totally out of my depth. I was like, I'm going into a job with people who are working for the biggest airline in Europe, one of the biggest airlines in the world. These guys are going to know way much more than me. But then when you actually get into these roles, you realize, well, actually, I've earned my right to be here. I actually do know as much as these guys. In terms of communication, I've never really considered myself a good communicator, right? I'm a bit of an introvert as well, so don't necessarily like talking in big crowds. I prefer to be one-on-one or one-on-two, in terms of having conversations. I'm pretty comfortable with that. So it was definitely a step outside my comfort zone in terms of communication. And I did find it hard because, I think most of what you do in an in-house role, you're right, it's communication and it's communicating with upper management. And you need to be able to get your point across, you need to be persuasive and all of those sort of things. So it's something I've had to work on over the last 7 or 8 years, and it's been probably the most challenging part, but also kind of most rewarding as well in terms of improving that side of what I do.
Yeah, I remember my first meeting coming into the Smartbox office, and I was so nervous, because for me, Smartbox is this huge brand. David's this big scary guy, head of SEO there. It's intimidating, and I'd imagine going to your board directors and stuff like that is the same thing in Ryanair or Smartbox or now Groupon. You're managing multiple sites around the world for Groupon. There's a lot of pressure on your shoulders, so being able to communicate what you're doing and why you're doing it, that takes a lot of skills. So I think anyone in those roles, you're a good communicator. You have to be, I think.
Yeah, and that's the thing, when you explain how you felt walking in, that's, how I would have felt walking into a lot of roles. Even when I joined Smartbox, when you're meeting your CMO or the CEO, you get the same thing. You're like, I need to sell not just SEO well, but I need to sell myself well. And it can be challenging and it can be daunting. Some people never give it a second thought, right? And they're really good at it and they're able to do it. But for me, it's always been a thing where I kind of have to, I kind of have to give myself a bit of a push and a bit of a kick and just say, do you know what, I am comfortable talking about SEO and I'm comfortable talking about things I know well. So once I'm not bullshitting someone, I'm generally all right in the conversation. So when it comes to SEO, I think I know enough about it that I feel comfortable talking to anyone about it, regardless of if it's another person in the industry or if it's the CEO of Groupon or Smartbox or whoever it might be, So that's kind of how I approach it anyway.
Because you're in the trenches, so I suppose if you're doing the right stuff, it's easy enough to put forward. So one thing I'm curious about, something I'm struggling with just now is decision fatigue. It's something that I've had a big issue with recently because I've got 3 brands now. Just so many decisions having to be made. It just wears you down. You've walked into Groupon where there's multiple websites with massive budgets, and you've got US, France, Italy, Germany. Is this right? UK. It's a lot of websites to manage. Yeah. How do you even pick where you start? How did you tackle
that? Look, it's kind of been this. It's one of the things I had to learn from probably day one when I went into Ryanair. And not specifically Groupon, but it did start in Ryanair, and I learned it very quickly because when I moved into Ryanair, first of all, they were in the middle of a CMS migration, and they were in the middle of migrating to HTTPS, which isn't necessarily a massive one, but the CMS migration was a huge one. Mm-hmm. So I came in the door, the first meeting on there, literally a table full of people turned to me and they're just like, we need answers for this, and this, and we need them today. I was like, okay, holy shit. I already felt like I was a bit out of my depth. But I think, decision fatigue, I think you need to approach it in the manner of, sometimes you just need to take a step back, right? And first of all, not be afraid to make a decision and not be afraid to make a decision and get it wrong, okay? So for me, that was one of the things I learned quickly. You're not going to get every decision right, even if it's the most informed decision. From an SEO perspective, it might be best practice to do something a certain way, for example, but you do it and it doesn't work out the way you think it will or has a negative impact for whatever reason. So I think not being afraid to make a decision, but also not being afraid of saying to somebody or to a client or to, in my case, upper management or a colleague or whatever, to say, I actually don't have an answer for you right now. I need to take that away. I need to do a bit of research. I need to do a bit of investigation or whatever the case may be. And, don't be afraid to go back and maybe go back to basics a little bit and say, what am I trying to achieve here? What is the outcome of this? What are they asking for? And then, for me, we get it all the time with internal teams. They're asking you looking for decisions. And sometimes you just have to go back to basics and say, whether that's going into Search Console and checking something that you know the answer to, but you just want to double check to make sure. Mm-hmm. So I suppose reinforcing that you know what you're doing, not being afraid to make decisions and not being afraid of getting those decisions wrong. For me, that's kind of it as well. But you're right, the decisions do come thick and fast.
Yeah, it's not to weigh you down. Or at least that's what I felt. And it's not so much that I can't make a decision, it's more there's just so many to be made right now. Yeah. And you're just like, what's going on? And I just thought you'd be in a similar situation with something like Groupon. Like that must be very daunting.
Yeah, like prioritization as well is a big part of it, right? Mm-hmm. So you need to prioritize what's important as well, right? Like if you have 100 decisions to make, what are the things that first of all, what do you need today or tomorrow? Mm-hmm. What do you have to have, and how do you prioritize those decisions? Like what are the ones that are going to make the biggest difference? Is there, what's the impact on the business? Or the expected impact on the business? What's the impact on other teams? What's the impact on your team? What are the resources needed to actually carry out that task or whatever it may be? So prioritization is part of it as well. And I think it's different for everyone. And every company and every website is different as well. So I think it is a very personal thing as well. And, what works for me might not work for you, for example. And, but that's how I generally approach these sort of things.
That's another thing as well. Like there's the tertiary, the secondary repercussions of the decisions we make. If you make a site change, that messes up the site speed, or that might mess up the web team somewhere down the line. You need to think about all these different teams. So I don't know the structure of Groupon, but I'm just going to assume they have a team for maybe conversion rate optimization, a team for site speed, stuff like that. So a lot of the decisions you make, I'm assuming you're going to have meetings and discuss these changes with all these people.
100%, absolutely. And look, the other thing as well is SEO. When you're working in SEO, and this is another thing, a challenge about working in house as well, is you kind of have to remind yourself where SEO comes in the overall value of the business, because sometimes it's a case, and this is not applicable to just Groupon, it's applicable to every company I've worked at. There's certain revenue streams that are super important, and where does SEO fit into that? So we can make recommendations, but it doesn't necessarily always mean that we get what we want. And that's the other thing. There's a lot of give and take in SEO. Like if I was doing something myself, I'd always go about it a different way, because it's not like you have free reign to do whatever you want on these websites, because there are other teams who have their own targets, their own KPIs, their own performance targets that they have to meet, whether that's conversion rate optimization. Again, I'm not a UX or CX designer, so they know what's best from that perspective. But we just have, all we can do as SEOs is say, do you know what, this is the best thing for SEO, this is what we're recommending, this is what value we feel it will bring, and if we don't do it, we're not going to have that value, we're not going to be able to add that value. And if we do it, if we do 50% of what we ask for, we can expect only 50% of the revenue that we're suggesting that we might be able to get from this. So, look, that's the way it goes. Working in-house, it's a lot of there's politics involved, but there's also you have to work closely with other teams, and the other thing is you have to understand that other teams. You have to respect other teams' decisions and understand their decisions too, right? And try and work them and find out, find that common ground and what works best for everyone, right? So,
I suppose that can be quite frustrating. So, do you have any so you joined Groupon? Did you take anyone out for dinner, or did you just go to the random meetings that you probably had lined up, or anything in particular you did? No.
When I first joined,
did you just try and get to know everyone?
Look, I think it was a bit of a difficult situation because I joined Groupon because we were all working remotely, which we still are for the most part. So it was quite a difficult situation. So you're trying to see the lay of the land, who's responsible for what. Yeah, you're arranging meetings with people and you're on Zoom catching up with people, and you're trying to kind of I suppose put out the feelers and see who's doing what, who's responsible for what, where do I fit, where does SEO fit within the overall strategy of the business, and all those things. So there's a lot to learn, like any new job, in the first couple of months, right? So I'm about 6 months into that role, and I'm starting to get to grips with
get comfortable
with the company, how it's structured, how the organization works, and all those things. So hopefully from here on out we can kick on a bit from an SEO perspective as well.
And how we're talking about these big decisions where you have to consult other teams and stuff like that. Going from an in-house role where it's a very fast-paced environment, you're probably used to just feeling very busy and working hard. Whereas I'd imagine in the positions you're in now, it's a lot. I could be wrong, but it's maybe a lot slower, a lot more strategy, a lot more critical thinking. Does that ever get to you? Because sometimes I could make big decisions, but because I don't feel busy, sometimes it's not as fulfilling, if that makes sense.
I 100% agree, and I know where you're coming from. I've always been very hands-on, right? I mean, even in my last role, leading a team and everything, I was not one of these people who let everyone else do everything and I'll just do strategy and sit back and tell people what to do. I've always been I've always been hands-on since day one. So getting in there and actually changing title tags, updating canonical tags, those simple little things. But sometimes for me personally, I need those little bits of hands-on SEO, as you said, to help make you feel like you're actually doing something, and it does make your day fulfilling when you're actually doing hands-on SEO work. But at the same time, you do have to take a step back, and you have to, what is my role? My role is to make sure that we have, is the strategy. My role is lots of different things, and sometimes it can be frustrating, as you alluded to a minute ago, frustrating, feeling like you're not getting stuff done. And sometimes it does feel like you're running on a treadmill, but you're not actually really going anywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
But I suppose it makes, when you do get things over the line, it makes it all the more sweeter, right? Because you've worked for a long time to try and get these things on board. So a lot of my day is like, creating docs, creating Excel files, but not necessarily
Taking tasks off.
doing tasks. It's more like preparing for, strategy items, key results, and all that sort of stuff, and the things that I need to focus on in terms of what the business is expecting from SEO and how are we going to deliver that. And then, I think I'll always have a little bit of hands-on, no matter what role I end up on, because I just like being hands-on. And I like
Good thing.
Yeah.
Being in the trenches.
Yeah, totally.
If you're in the trenches too long, you forget what's happening. Things change too fast, and then you close. I've been in the trenches the last few weeks, and I think that's the issue. I think the issue is that I always call it like leveling up. So I feel like I'm in a period where I'm about to level up to the next level, and there's been so many decisions being made recently. Dealing with that burnout, I'm just kind of like, I feel like everything's on my shoulders just now. But now that it's starting to tick off, I'll definitely go into a more calm place and then be able to take a step back. I mean, last year I took 3 months and partied in Barcelona. I got very lucky to do that. Do you find yourself in companies like Groupon go through these phases where there's like sprints of a lot of hard work and then more relaxed phases, or is it just always on the go?
It's kind of a little bit of both. I'd usually say Q4, so the last 3 months of the year are generally
Like sprints.
a little less going on in terms of, you're preparing for what you're going to do in Q1 the following year, but you will have code freezes and stuff like that in busy periods like Black Friday, in the lead up to Christmas, over Christmas, because there's just too much traffic going on these websites that you have to have code freezes, so there's not many changes happening. So you're still busy, but you're just busy in a different way because you're preparing for next year's strategy. You're probably getting to do a lot of the work that you wanted to get done during the year maybe, but you didn't have the chance to do, so you get to do that extra research or whatever the case may be. So, but it's pretty hands-on all the time. I think when I worked in an agency and I'd never worked in-house, I always thought, what do people in-house do? Like, they're obviously sitting on their asses doing nothing, right? Like, they have one website or they have a handful of websites. Like, it can't be that hard, right? But it's just different. It's just different. And you either like agency or you like in-house. And I personally, I think that's the way it is. And people just have an affinity with one or the other and like one or the other. And for me, in-house works for me. And it is constantly busy, but just in a different way to agency, I'd say.
And so how big is the SEO team at Groupon?
The SEO team, at the moment, there's 5 of us. There's 4 of us in the main SEO team. Then there's an SEO engineering team. Okay. So there's another few people in the SEO engineering team. And then there'll be like a product owner as well for SEO. So there's kind of an extended team within that. So we're very lucky to have a team where we have dedicated engineers for SEO, because that gives us the ability to, I suppose, control a lot of the changes that we're doing, and not necessarily have to rely less on maybe a shared team of engineers or developers, for example. So from that aspect, it works really well. Hopefully, I suppose coming out of the pandemic, off the back of the pandemic, hopefully we'll be in a position to grow the team as well going forward. But again, you always want your team to grow, because the more hands you have, the more work you can do, right? So.
And so the team that you've got now in the SEO team, have you helped hire any of them recently, or were they all there before? No, just I hired one person. Mm-hmm. So that was a technical SEO. And how did that go?
We ended up with a great candidate and great guy who's in our team now. Pavel, he's located in Dublin as well, and we're very lucky. Yeah. Because the market is quite difficult, as you guys will rightly know. It's super difficult. Yeah, it's super difficult at the moment to get really good people. And over all the years of hiring, I've actually been very fortunate where I've always ended up getting good people somehow. And, sometimes it's just luck and timing as well. The right person sees the ad being advertised at the right time. And again, Dublin is a small place. Everyone knows everyone. So if people are looking for a job, in SEO, they'll probably know, not necessarily know myself, but they'll know someone who's worked with me in the past or whatever the case may be. So people do their research as well and decide where they want to work as well, right? So sometimes you just get that perfect match or that perfect fit. And I think we've got that with the technical SEO we hired, but it is getting really difficult at the moment to find talent.
Is it, for someone that's maybe wanting to move up the corporate world, is it worth their while to move to Dublin?
A lot of opportunity.
Has the pandemic changed that?
Yeah, the pandemic's probably changed it a little bit in terms of people, are able to. I think prospective candidates have a lot more control at the moment. I think they can choose where they want to work from. I think Dublin's always been a good place, right, in terms of digital. We've been very fortunate in Dublin to have loads of big companies here, Facebook, Google, Groupon, Ryanair, HubSpot. There's a lot of good big companies here, so it always has attracted a lot of talent. It's not the cheapest place in the world to live either. Rents are...
I think it's the second most expensive city in Europe or something?
Yeah, and rents are pretty high, so that kind of puts people off a certain bit as well. But now that people have a bit more flexibility in terms of how often they need to go into the office, it gives people the opportunity that if they're working for a business that's located in the city centre, they don't necessarily have to live in the city centre. Look, I'm from Dublin. I love Dublin. I would say it's a nice place to live, a nice place to work, and there is a lot of opportunity. I think candidates market at the moment, they can pick and choose almost.
Everyone's wanting to work from home now too, which I don't really get. Like, I personally, I don't like working from home. Like, I did it before the pandemic even begun, and I was so done with it when the pandemic started. So it was even worse for me. I just don't get it. I think a few days a week is nice, but any more than that, I just miss having people in the office. I miss having that social side of things too. And I think as well, like, when big decisions have to be made, it's much better having those conversations in person as opposed to over Zoom. Like, this is why we're doing all these podcasts in person now, because it's just much more natural, much more enjoyable, and I'm bored of Zoom. I'm so done with Zoom. But
you said you've been in Groupon 8 months now?
You've been in the office once. Yeah. So and the day I went in was to meet the new technical SEO that we hired, right? So I got to meet him in person, which was great. Luckily I actually know a couple of my colleagues already because, as I said already, Dublin's a small place. So I do know people working in Groupon. So that's definitely made things a little bit easier. But, I will go back into the office a couple of days a week, if nothing else, just to get out of my house, and get away from it. It's nice to be able to go out for lunch with people. And for me, when I've just started a new role, it's good for me to actually get to meet people face to face because, you don't want to be that person who's messaging someone on Zoom, how was your weekend? And they're saying, who's this fella? Right? But, if you meet someone in the canteen and you're having a coffee, it's totally normal to say, how was your weekend? But
so, here's the thing, right? So I've said about in-house people being good communicators. How are all these newer, younger candidates going to develop those social and core skills if they're never in the workplace? Like, will that happen through Zoom? I don't think it will.
No, you're probably right. It's going to be difficult, and I think it's really difficult for people starting out their career because, I'm at a stage in my career, where I'm relatively confident in what I do. I don't need to rely on an awful lot of people for information and for knowledge. Of course you do when you start a new job, you need tidbits of information and ask people questions. But when you're starting out, like I said, going back to when I started in Red Engine, you need someone to sit beside and ask them the stupid questions, right? And ask them the obvious stuff. right? And people are always more than willing to help, but you're probably right. Like you can't do that in Zoom, right? You can't do that over chat. It's hard.
You can. Like if you go back, I did the same thing with the loads of questions. I remember asking my manager loads of questions, but I don't think he'd reply to half of them if it was all via Slack. Can you imagine getting pinged 50 messages in a day from the new intern in the office? He would be muted quickly. Like it's much better to take them aside in the office, show them things, or say, just come and watch over my shoulder for 5 minutes. You can't do that on Zoom. But you can, it's just annoying, isn't it?
Yeah,
but
it's
anyway,
different dynamic for sure.
Yeah. So what about, so in the corporate world, right, someone who wants to move into the corporate space from agency life, is there anything they can do to present themselves better? Or, because I'd imagine, a lot of the agency work is literally content links. Do you get where I'm going here?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to say certain things. So when you're qualifying someone to join, let's say Groupon, the team in Groupon, what are you looking at in particular?
So look, I know exactly where you're coming from, and I've done a lot. Like even our last hire, we would have interviewed quite a few people, right? And genuinely, we had a lot of really good candidates. I think for me, there's a couple of things, and they talk about, is this person a fit for the company? Do they match the company culture? I didn't know the culture. I was only in the door when I was hiring, but you get a sense of, for me, one of the things that is super important is, can I work with this person? Because at the end of the day, people need to be happy in their jobs. They need to get on with their colleagues. Expertise aside, you still need to have normal conversations. You need to have relationships with people. You have to be able to rely on people and all these things. So for me, it's one of the most important things is, do I think they'll be able to get on with me? But also, do I think they'll represent the SEO team well when they're talking with other people and other teams? Another thing as well is, I think it's not about what people say. For me, it's not really what people say or do in interviews. It's how they approach it, right? And people who can think for themselves, people who are, again, I go back to the thing, not afraid to make a mistake or not afraid to say something that goes against the grain, maybe. Because a lot of time you get people who come into interviews, and I totally get it. They want to do their best. They don't want to make a mistake.
What you say.
And they'll sit there and they'll just say yes, no, or whatever. And, for example, I think when we were hiring for this technical role, just to put an SEO slant on it, you ask people, what are the elements of SEO that are super important right now? And everyone is just reeling off core web vitals, core web vitals, core web vitals, core. And you're like, oh yeah, but do you actually think that's important, or is it just because you've read that it's important, right? And then when you start to talk to people, and one or two of the candidates who, for me, would impress me with people who actually said, well, do you know what? Yeah, everyone's doing it, and Google's telling us to do it, but right now, no, I don't think it's a major priority. Oh, cool. Why do you think that? I think that because A, B, C, and D, and they're showing that. It's the whole thing of, when you're doing a maths exam, when you're in school, it's like, it's not what the final answer is. Your final answer could be wrong, but you can still get 99%. How did you go about what was your logic? How did you go and work that out? What was your reasoning? And that's what you want. You want people to show a bit of belief in themselves, a bit of courage, and also not afraid to have their own opinion. Because an SEO, an SEO team needs people to have different opinions, right? Because you don't want everyone just agreeing, because you'll end up not going down the right path. You need people. For me, even after all these years, I need to bounce ideas off people and go, what do you actually think about that? Because sometimes someone will look at something from a different perspective to you. So I don't want to hire someone who's just going to be a yes man or a yes woman either, right? I want someone who's actually going to, have their own opinion, challenge, have their own way of thinking about things. And so for me, I don't know if that answers your question, but it
does. I was just trying to be careful what I say, because I do know big corporate companies, you're not allowed to let all your secrets away. But that's kind of what I was looking for, like who you're hiring, what are you looking for in them, and basically just what advice we could give to viewers who do like the idea of going in-house, because we haven't really had anyone on that's in-house. Everyone's agency so far. You're the first in-house person, except Misguided, actually. That's a lie. And he'll be in the same position too, I'd imagine too. So
yeah, and look, again, this is just my experience, my point of view. As I said, like, everyone's going to have a different way of looking at things, but yeah, I think for me, and it is a hard step for people to go from agency into in-house as well, because it is quite different. But again, you know, I say, like, the don'ts of being in an interview particularly for an SEO position. Don't come in and start telling the SEO manager who's hiring you all the things that are wrong with the website, right? Because that person,
them off.
yeah, that person is going to know already, right? And they're addressing those things. Yeah. So unless they're asked, obviously, but don't go in, you know, trying to poke holes in what they're doing. You know, have your own ideas, and don't be afraid to I suppose, get it wrong and to suggest things and to bring your own ideas to the table as well.
What would your thoughts be on someone coming in with their own, like, side hustle, for example, having their own affiliate sites that they were able to show you?
Me personally, I'd encourage it. Obviously, I'd encourage it, not obviously on work time, right? But no, 100% encourage it, because for me, that says so much about a person, right? I suppose their willingness to work hard, their willingness to learn, their willingness and understanding to try new things, and they're probably, I suppose this is one of the things as well, from a technical perspective, it's always good for people to have websites on the side so they can play around with things, try different things, they'll have a better understanding of what things work, what things don't work. So side hustle for me, I'd have no problem with it, and for me it's definitely a big plus and a bonus. I don't know if everyone say the same, but for me, you know, I'd be more impressed with that than think it's a negative personally.
We spoke to someone recently who might be coming on the podcast, and he worked at quite a large brand, and he's actually building his own side hustle again, because he's been out of the trenches for so long that, like, he works with massive budgets now, but he's working with big budgets, big decisions, bigger impact, but now he's working with small budget. It's like, small budgets, it has to go so far, and that's something he said's been quite testing, going from being at such a high level back down to the bottom, trying to start up again. So even he's gone back to building his own side hustles now, and he's been in the game 10 plus years too.
I think it's super important, but I think having something on the side, regardless of whether it's something that's going to make you money or regardless of the reasons for doing it, I think it's super important for your own development, keeping yourself sane, learning something new, you know, keeping yourself, I suppose, keeping that learning mentality and keeping you sharp, I think, as well. It's super important. So, you know, I've had websites on the side myself, you know, nothing that I'm going to be retiring on, right? But it's just having something there that you can play around with, you can try a few new things, and then, you know, at some stage in your life, maybe you do want to have something to fall back on as well, right? So you might have something that's halfway set up already, you know.
Do you think you stay in SEO, or the other channels interest you?
It's one of those things. I don't want to stay in SEO forever, right? And as I said, when I started off, I would have been doing a little bit of everything. I would have been doing SEM, email marketing. So, look, I haven't gone near any of those channels in a long time, but I know the basics of them. I know the fundamentals of them. I would potentially, I think, enjoy leading a different channel or leading multiple channels at some point. So maybe SEO and other channels amongst that. So yeah, that would definitely interest me. It'd be definitely a learning curve for me, right? And it would have to be a case of going back and doing some sort of learning and retraining, familiarising myself with things again. But, you know, I've always worked with SEM teams, so we've worked across collaboratively with those sort of teams. So you would be well aware in an in-house team of what's going on in other channels and how they operate and how they work. Yeah,
you get a basic understanding. Yeah. This question we might not be able to put in, so we'll cut this out. Have you, obviously in such a big role, with all these big companies, you've worked with partners, external partners quite a lot. What advice can you give to external partners looking to work with big corporate companies? How is the best way to work with people like you? How do we not piss you off, and how do we make your life easier? Because you must have experienced quite a few of these. Can we talk about this?
Yeah, look, I think it's a difficult one, right? In terms of, I'm not going to, obviously, I can't paint every agency with the same brush, right? But the way, for me, when I've been working with agencies, I've worked with some awesome agencies and awesome people within agencies, right? No doubt about it. I think the problem you have when you're working with agencies, I think people within agencies are put under so much pressure themselves, and they're expected to manage so many clients and so much work that it's very difficult for them to dedicate the focus for a particular client. Yeah. Now, I think being proactive for an agency is super important, and I think agencies should be really proactive. Instead of waiting for the client to come to them with something, they need to be really proactive and coming to the client saying, we've done this bit of work, or we've identified this, or here's some ideas we have. Can we pursue this? Can we pursue that? But if being proactive is one of the main things. Big companies like Groupon, like Ryanair, like Smartbox, whoever, they spend a lot of money on third-party agencies, right? They always do. And agencies provide a lot of value in terms of, for certain things, they provide a lot of value. It's great to have support. It's great to be working with people who are working across loads of sectors, so they see a lot of different things going on. Some of them will have access to Google. If they're Google partners, they'll have access to Google, so you might be able to do workshops with Google, and they expose you to those sort of things. So from that perspective, it's really good and it's really helpful. But I think it's always going to be there to a certain extent, that support required from big corporations, big companies relying on agencies. But yeah, the main thing is being proactive, going out of your way to try and help your clients without pissing them off, basically. And inevitably what happens is, in my experiences, agencies are, they're super enthusiastic for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And then they get in the comfort zone, and then it kind of tails off, and then the relationship isn't maintained throughout the whole thing. And inevitably, I think that's kind of part of the life cycle of
it happens across the board. Yeah, I think so. I think it's because most agencies usually get a big contract, and then they need to. It's always stop-start with agencies. So it's been able to manage that. Something I've experienced is how to manage that. And I think that's where the communication thing comes in. So are you saying, even if you're going to be late or deliverable, be upfront about it, just make you 100% aware, and you'd be less likely to be annoyed?
Yeah, it's like, and I think personally I'd always be pretty flexible on those things. Again, it's about if I suppose the agency is genuinely supporting your needs and is genuinely being proactive and helping you actually solve problems. And like, the whole thing of, for example, I use the case of audits, right? Because this is something we see all the time, and I'm not referring to any agency in particular, but, you ask a client asks their agency for an audit for a particular reason, and they just churn out something that's the exact same as they do for everyone, except they change the header on the PDF or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. They're not the sort of things you want. You want personalized service. You want people to actually care about their business, your needs, and not go in with just like buzzwords and looking for sound bites, right? You really need to want to help the client progress. But the other thing as well is, and this would be the same in my experience, if you prove to a client that you can help them progress and that you're adding value, that's going to help.
What's the longest an agency's worked with the company you've worked with in your experience? 1 year, 2 years?
The longest?
Yeah.
In SEO or just in general?
Well, let's just use SEO. I'm just curious, like, can they stick at it for longer than 2 years?
Yeah. I think 100%. I've worked in companies where the SEM agency have been partners for 5, 6, 7 years. So
you must be good.
Yeah, and then generally, I think for an SEO, from my experience, kind of, I don't know, like 2, 3, 4 years. I'd say 2 years is probably about normal, 2 or 3 years, right? Because a lot can change in that time. Because from a client's perspective, they might get a new account manager in the agency or something, or from on the client side of things, maybe an SEO manager leaves or someone leaves, the point of contact leaves, and that changes. And that sometimes changes the dynamic in the relationship as well. And sometimes things can just fizzle out from there as well. But I think it really depends on the relationship, on the company, on the agency that it is. But
there are a lot of emotions involved. So let's say you're working with an agency, algorithm update comes out, next minute your director, your bosses are now chapping the door wondering what's going on with SEO traffic. That must put a lot of pressure on your relationship with the agency too, or do you just take a step back and just be a bit more logical about it? That must be hard, no?
Look, there's always ups and downs with SEO, as you well know, right? Luckily, I'm not going to say never, because people would probably could dispute this, but generally I haven't been ever hit super hard by an update. So now maybe I'm just lucky, or maybe probably loads of reasons for it, right? But I've never been hit super hard. But I know the point you're trying to make. Basically, it all comes down to the agency at the end of the day. Once they can shut off their email and they don't have to hear from the client, right, anymore. I'm working with these people day in, day out. So if there are mistakes, if there is problems with SEO traffic, it falls on the SEO team. Like, that's the reality of it. It doesn't fall on the agency. You can never point the finger at the agency, right? Because we know that we have enough expertise in-house to do the job and to do the job right. The agency is just an additional support on top of that, right? So they're not necessarily bringing extra SEO knowledge as such, right? So I think the book stops at the SEO team, and
that's it.
Yeah.
Fair. Yeah. I always wondered, because it's probably pretty scary for the agencies too, to work with people like you, like contracts. Imagine an algorithm hit, they'd be like, yo.
No doubt.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Fair.
So in terms of, if we just go back to the technical SEO role that you had, I'm sure there was quite a lot of people that applied for that and didn't make it. About a month ago, we had a tech SEO specialist role, and we interviewed quite a few people, and I'd say 2 of them actually had the skills to make it through. See, the people that are trying to get technical SEO roles, because there could be a 10 grand pay jump in that as well. What advice would you give to somebody for that?
In terms of how they can improve their chances of, I think sometimes you can just be excuse me, I think sometimes you can just be a little bit unlucky about who you come up against, right? You could just genuinely be up against someone who's, super talented, really good at the interviews, and you just don't get the role. Again, it kind of goes back to what you guys were already saying. If people are demonstrating that they know technical SEO and they understand it really well, I think that really helps. So if you have, whether you have a side hustle or your own website or whatever it may be, I think that's super helpful. I think it's a hard one, because you can't always people come in that give examples, I did X, Y, and Z in my last role and blah, 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 whatever. I think you need to be very progressive and forward thinking as well. Like, what do you think are going to be the important factors for the company that's looking to hire you? So again, don't point out mistakes, but what are the elements that could be important to them and that that will resonate with the hiring manager? For example, I don't know, like, again, I'm thinking of something like, no one ever comes into me and talks about hierarchy or site structure, for example, right? People they don't mention it in interviews, and it's just one of those things that it's always going to be important to a big website to make sure that you have these things in place. Asking questions, I think, is super important, and I think candidates are often maybe a little bit intimidated or scared or not confident enough to ask questions. But ask questions about how's the technical SEO performance of the website. Is there, is there anything going on? Is there any big projects that you're working on? What are the projects you're working on from a technical SEO perspective? To try and, get that understanding, because we had candidates come in for roles. I've had candidates come in for roles over the years, and you ask them again, like, why do you want to join Groupon, or why do you want to join Smartbox, or why do you want to join whatever, right? And they just have this generic answer. They don't really care who they're working for. They just want a job, right? Mm-hmm. So they don't care whether you're working for, whatever. They'll give you some generic answer. But if you actually bring it back...
We were laughing because of one in particular. Are you sniggering about? I'm thinking, we had a guy come on and he went, "It's a bit of me."
I asked him, I was like, what did you find most exciting about this role? And he was like, when you look up a job description, you have a read through it, you just go, that's a bit of me. That was his answer.
Yeah, but
and we were trying not to laugh on the interview as well.
We just had a streak of bad interviews this day. It was pretty bad, man. I don't get it. I don't get why people try and go for roles that they're 100% not qualified for. I get if you're 70% qualified and you can do the extra bit in the role or in the upcoming to the role. But we've had people literally go, and they're literally reading off something here, total bullshit the whole thing. We've had people come in, technical SEO role, I've probably said this in 3 podcasts now, but it still pisses me off, who literally came on and says, yeah, it's a technical SEO role, isn't it? And he went, I just get my audits off at work, and I was just like, right, just waste my time. We've had so many, this is before we started putting filtering in place, but before that we had a lot of bad ones. I just don't get it. I don't get why you're kind of wasting your own time as well. Get on this interview because you're 100% not going to get it.
I think a willingness to learn is super important as well. Like if the candidate shows a willingness to actually, that they want to progress their career, they want to learn, for me, especially if technical SEO comes in, you don't expect them to have the same skills as a developer, right? But you want them, I prefer someone say to me as a technical SEO, maybe coming in and saying, I understand HTML, but I don't know a huge amount about JavaScript. I'd love to learn more about that. Does your company offer some sort of education bonus or education money that we can put towards going and doing some sort of course so I can go and learn something, all those sort of questions. And they're the things that, you want to see in candidates, I personally want to see in candidates. It's super important because at the end of the day, especially with SEO, right? Nobody knows everything. No one's the final product. Everyone's always still learning, right? So you have to show that willingness to learn, right? And I think that's a super important one as well.
Yeah. And so following on that, how do you keep your SEO knowledge sharp?
Oh, yeah, well, look, I try my best to keep it sharp, right? There's only so many hours in the day. Now, the generic answer is, I read SEO blogs, right? That's a given, right? You should be doing that regardless if you're not trying to keep your SEO knowledge sharp or not. If you're working in SEO or SEM or anything, you should be reading blogs. Do you take everything at face value? No, but you take information from multiple sources and then make your own mind up about it. That's the way I've always looked at it. Again, it goes back to asking questions. Like, I'm lucky that I have a good SEO engineering team. I worked with great engineers in the past where I'd hammer down the questions, ask them questions about things, because yes, I understand technical SEO, but I don't understand everything technical. I don't about a website. I don't about microservices, how different microservices within our business work and how do they all communicate to each other, and how does the information pass from one place to another. I just don't know all of those things and understand it in depth. So for me, it's related to not just keeping on top of keeping sharp from an SEO perspective, but trying to learn more things that will help you be better at SEO and help you understand SEO elements better going forward, right? That you can then bring to another project or another role. But reading stuff, I read everything online, spend all my time reading stuff. I like reading case studies in terms of, but we also do SEO testing. We have an SEO testing program that we started in Groupon. That's the best way to learn, right? All you have to do is we just have to keep on testing things, trying things. Some will work, some won't. But that's the best way to learn. That's the only way we'll learn. And also things that are applicable in my role now may not have been applicable in previous roles, didn't work on other websites, for example.
Can I ask about the testing program? Is that a bit of budget put away just to test different strategies?
So in terms of testing, we have generally a good site structure, right? So that allows us to test groups of pages and subset groups of pages. Okay. We do a lot of testing, whether it's like, and again, we're quite a new team, so we're only getting a lot of this going now. So for us, it's really important that we see what works, see what doesn't. Now, we're only starting, but we want to take it, we will eventually take it to the next level and try and get our engineers involved with all this testing as well. At the moment, we're doing some very basic stuff. It's like a lot of metadata stuff and things like that. But I think you've got to keep on learning. You've got to keep seeing what moves the needle, what makes a difference, what doesn't. And the only way to do that is either try on your own website, if you have your own website, or but be ballsy enough to go and try it on the website for the company that you're working for. So whether that's on your client's website, and again, that's another thing I'd say about agencies, don't be afraid to come to a client and go, do you know what, we want to try this X, Y, or Z. It might not work, but we want to give it a try because we feel like there could be some good potential uplift. And trying new things is how you learn, and you'll probably get it right 30% of the time, but not being afraid of failure is, from an SEO perspective, you have to be that way inclined, I think.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Groupon's got local and it's got coupons. So are you managing both?
Coupons is a separate team, so it's a separate line of business essentially, and it's a different revenue stream. So coupons would sit outside of local.
Yeah, because basically coupons would be more national, local, obviously local. But I remember working on similar keywords, and those SERPs changed all the time. I remember one time it was London keywords. They just completely wiped out the pages that were on it and changed it. So there's a lot of data to be gathered potentially, but you could also get wrapped up in a lot of data too. How are you dealing with that?
Yeah, look, there's also other issues around that. There's cannibalization as well. When you have separate SEO teams like that, you just have to make sure that, again, it comes back to the communication thing. You have to communicate with the other teams, which we do, and you have to communicate to make sure that you're avoiding cannibalization, that you're not doing something that inadvertently impacts their performance and vice versa. So, yeah, there's a lot around communication. In terms of data, like, people are talking a lot about big data now. It's very easy to get bogged down in it, right?
Sure, 100%. Decision fatigue again, data fatigue.
Sometimes you need to step back, and again, I'm in a lucky position where we have a super strong analytics team, and we have people there to build us dashboards. We have people there who can do these deep dives for us and get us the answers we need. Of course, you're still doing a lot of data dives yourself, but at the same time, we do have that additional support, and it goes back to the thing of what's the advantage of working for a big company or like Groupon or anyone else. You do have those supports from other teams and from those types of experts who are essentially there to support the business, and that's super valuable as well. But you're right, you can get bogged down in it. But I think, again, from an SEO perspective, sometimes what people forget is SEO is not rocket science, right? It's not super complicated. The things that were important for SEO 10 years ago pretty much are same things. It's changed, but the same things are important. Yeah. Don't forget the basics. Do the basics right. And obviously there's other things you need to do, right?
There's a lot of noise there as well.
Yeah, there is a lot of noise, but sometimes you just have to take a step back and go, use a bit of cop on and look at things from the perspective of, what are the main elements of SEO that are going to help us rank better for a rank better page, or whatever the case may be, or how can we avoid cannibalization? And it's not rocket science. It's just sometimes taking smaller chunks of information, the ones that you feel are going to be most valuable, and breaking it down that way. Because I think if you look at the whole picture, it becomes a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, for sure. I can imagine. There's a lot of local pages to deal with. But yeah, I think that's probably come to an hour now, and that's been really good. So
Maybe we should wrap up on the last question. David, where do you think the SEO industry is going?
It's one of these things people have been saying for years. SEO is dead, right? And it's been the headline you see every year and all the online blogs and everything. Personally, and maybe I'm just wishful thinking, but I think the SEO industry is going to I think it's in a good place, and I think it's only going to get better. The reason why I say that now is, in my experience, what I've seen a shift over the last couple of years, and that shift is that the people who are in the leading positions in big organizations now are people who have come from companies and come from roles where they knew SEO was important. So these are people who are making their way and growing in their careers, and these are now the business leaders within a lot of online businesses, and they understand the importance of all the different channels, and particularly SEO. And that's been my experience. And because when I started out, SEO was very new. The people that you were talking to in higher up positions didn't even know what SEO stood for, right? Now, when you meet with a CMO or whoever it may be, they know exactly what SEO is. They may have actually even worked in SEO themselves, which is something that I've only seen in the last couple of years. So for me, I think there's going to be a big shift. I think there's going to be, I think we see it right now. There's still a bigger demand for
100%.
And I don't know if that's good for guys like yourself or worse.
Good for me, but I think for some agencies, and this is why I asked about the agency thing earlier, there's a lot of agencies just now bringing in a lot of money, which makes them bigger, but it's almost like, I said this analogy to Josh earlier, you're literally a table with rocky foundations, one of those legs go and the whole thing's good. And some of these agencies, and me including, I think everyone is growing fast just now, and that's why I'm also feeling a little bit burned out, because I'm doubled in size overnight, and it's like, yo, what do I do now? It's then trying to recruit the same amount of staff. Anyone, doesn't matter who you are, if you scale that fast, you need to slow down, take a stop, and it's whether or not some of these agencies do slow down, stop, fix the foundations, and then move on. So when I was asking you earlier about, say, a smaller agency landed Groupon as a client, that's a lot of scaling they need to do. Can they keep up with it? I think it's very hard to do. I think they could for a while. That's also why I asked you about how long they could last for. But I think there's a lot of money coming into the industry. There's a lot of people that are also growing in their careers, and there's a lot of people asking for massive pay jumps just now, going for titles that they probably don't deserve. And it's going to be interesting. There's a lack. What I'm saying is there's a lack of talent, a lot of work, which everyone knows. Everyone who's experienced in the industry knows this just now. So how do we get more people in, trained up? I don't know. Are you ever thinking about a training scheme within Groupon? Was that even be brought up yet? I know you're brand new.
I'm pretty sure there'd be training schemes within other areas of the business. I know, from an engineering and dev perspective, they have they do internships and stuff like that for college students and things like that. So yeah, in SEO, I've never been involved in anything like that. It's an interesting one, right? Because I think people are super interested in SEO when they actually learn anything about it, right?
I think you need to get to a certain level though where they understand it, then it becomes interesting. Yeah. But that first little bit, you're just kind of what's going on?
Content and links.
What is a link? Yeah. It's just, it's maybe a bit too much in the beginning. But that's the thing, there's so many people giving you the blueprint. Not a lot of people do it. Matt Diggy's Affiliate Lab, so many people have been taught how to build a successful affiliate website. How many people actually get it to 10k plus a month? This is probably, I'm going to check this after, but probably not a lot. Same goes for an agency course. There's loads of agency courses out there. How many people that have the blueprint actually succeed? So yeah, I'm kind of going off topic now, but I think as well for a brand like Groupon, you probably won't need to worry about getting talent because it's such a big brand. People want to work there, but some of the lower companies, I think they'll struggle.